The scoop of chocolate ice cream slammed into Folasade Adalakin's shoulders so hard that some of it splattered across her cheek. Cold chocolate slid down the side of her face. A thick streak landed on the front of her cream-colored blouse. For one brief second, the ballroom froze. Then laughter exploded. Not surprised laughter, not awkward laughter, the kind that came from people who were relieved the humiliation was happening to someone else. Sade stood perfectly still. Chocolate dripped from her collarbone. A drop slid onto the polished marble floor. Another landed on her shoe. Across from her, Tae-young lowered the spoon with a grin. Oops. More laughter. The manager shrugged. My hand slipped. Nobody believed him. Not the interns, not the analysts, not the clients. Certainly not Sade. The annual holiday gala continued around them, beneath sparkling crystal chandeliers, while expensive jazz music floated through the room. Executives chatted. Partners drank champagne. Clients exchanged business cards. And standing in the middle of it all was a young black intern covered in chocolate ice cream, while half the company watched. "Look at her face!" someone snorted. A woman near the dessert table laughed. "Oh my God!" Another voice chimed in. "That's hilarious!" Tae-young folded his arms. "What?" He looked around innocently. "It was an accident." The room rewarded him with more laughter. Sade felt her heartbeat pounding against her ribs. 3 weeks. 3 weeks of insults. 3 weeks of being talked over. 3 weeks of having her work stolen. 3 weeks of pretending not to hear the comments. The comments about her accent. The comments about her background. The comments about how she didn't belong in a place like this. And now, this. She reached for a napkin. The smile immediately vanished from Tae-young's face. "Where are you going?" She paused. "To clean this up?" "No." The word came sharp, commanding. Several people looked up. Tae-young pointed toward a group of clients sitting near the bar. "Forget the blouse." A slow grin spread across his face. "I need drinks." The room immediately understood what he was doing. Sade did too. For a second, she simply stared at him. Chocolate continued dripping from her clothes. "You want me to serve clients like this?" Tae-young shrugged. "You already look the part." The laughter came faster this time. Louder. Crueler. One of the analysts nearly spat out his drink. "That's wild." Another employee smirked. "Honestly, she should be grateful she's even here." "Exactly." A woman folded her arms. "Some people get one opportunity and suddenly think they're executives." The group laughed. Sade's jaw tightened. The comments kept coming, like sharks smelling blood. "I heard she got hired without connections." "No way. Nobody gets hired here without connections." A man leaned closer. Maybe she impressed somebody. The way he said it made the meaning obvious. Several people laughed. Another woman rolled her eyes. "Please." We all know how girls like her get opportunities. Sade felt something twist inside her chest. Not sadness, not embarrassment. Anger. Pure anger. But she swallowed it, because losing control would give them exactly what they wanted. If you've ever stayed quiet because speaking up would only make things worse, you already know how exhausting that feels. Let us know in the comments. Tae-young stepped closer. "So what are you waiting for?" He shoved a serving tray toward her. "Take it." Sade looked down at the tray, then back at him.
Neither moved. The tension stretched. Finally, she took the tray. A victorious smile appeared on Taeyoung's face. There it is. Submission. At least that's what he thought. The truth was simpler. Sade needed this internship. She had worked too hard to get here. Too many late nights. Too many scholarships. Too many sacrifices. She wasn't about to throw everything away because a grown man desperately needed an audience. So she took the tray. The room relaxed. Several people laughed again. The show was continuing, exactly as expected. Taeyoung leaned close enough that only she could hear. That's better. His voice dripped with satisfaction. Know your place. Sade's grip tightened around the tray. Taeyoung stepped back, then said something louder, something intended for everyone. See? He spread his arms dramatically. Much better. Trash belongs in service.
The room erupted, even louder than before. Some people laughed immediately. Others hesitated. A few looked uncomfortable, but none of them spoke. Not one. Sade felt her stomach drop, not because of the insult, because of the silence that followed it. 40 people. 40 educated professionals. 40 adults. And nobody said a word.
Across the room, near the balcony overlooking the party, a man in a charcoal suit stopped moving entirely. His champagne remained untouched, his expression unreadable, his eyes fixed on one person, Folasade. Nobody noticed him. Nobody paid attention. The entire room was too focused on the entertainment.
Meanwhile, Taeyoung was enjoying himself. For the first time all evening, Sade saw it clearly. This wasn't about her. It never had been. People like Taeyoung didn't humiliate others because they were powerful. They humiliated others because they were afraid they weren't. And Sade had unknowingly become a threat. She had corrected forecasting errors during her first week, caught mistakes senior analysts missed, earned praise from clients, solved problems faster than employees who had been there for years. Every compliment she received was another reminder of everything Taeyoung wasn't, and he hated her for it. The realization made something inside her settle. Not fear, not defeat, a decision. Taeyoung pointed toward the bar. Go. Sade didn't move. His smile faded. I said go. Still, she didn't move. The room slowly grew quiet. People began noticing. Something had changed. Taeyoung's eyes narrowed. Did you hear me?
Sade looked down at the tray, then slowly set it on the nearest table. The metal clink echoed through the silence. A few people exchanged nervous glances. Taeyoung took a step forward. What are you doing? For 3 weeks, she had stayed silent. For 3 weeks, she had endured. For 3 weeks, she had let things go. But tonight felt different. Tonight felt like a line, and she had finally reached it. Sade lifted her eyes, met his gaze, and said a single word. No. The entire ballroom went silent. The silence after Sade's single word felt heavier than all the laughter that had come before it. No. Not shouted, not emotional, just firm, certain, final. For a moment, nobody moved.
Nobody spoke. Even the music seemed distant.
Tae-young stared at her as though she had suddenly started speaking another language. Because in his world, people like Sade didn't say no. Not to him, not publicly, not ever. The smile disappeared from his face.
What did you say? Sade didn't blink. I said no. A nervous murmur rippled through the crowd. Several employees immediately looked away. Others pretended to check their phones. Nobody wanted to be involved. Nobody ever wanted to be involved. That was exactly how Tae-young had survived for so long. His family had helped build Yoon Capital Group. They were the founding members of the company. His grandfather's portrait still hung in the executive wing. His father occupied a board seat. His uncle controlled enough shares to influence major decisions. Tae-young had spent most of his life believing the company belonged to him. Then Jun-ho Baek arrived. The outsider. The man the board chose as CEO instead. The rejection had humiliated Tae-young in ways he'd never recovered from. And since he couldn't control the board, he controlled whoever he could. Interns, assistants, junior analysts, anyone without power, anyone who couldn't fight back. 3 interns had quietly resigned during the previous 2 years. 2 analysts requested transfers. 1 assistant suffered panic attacks every morning before work. None of those stories ever reached official reports, because fear had a way of making people stay silent. And silence
was Tae-young's greatest ally.
Then Sade arrived, and somehow made everything worse. Because she wasn't supposed to be exceptional. Yet within days, she had spotted errors in reports senior analysts approved. Within weeks, she had developed a risk model that outperformed one of Tae-young's own projections. And every time she succeeded, Tae-young found a way to claim credit. In meetings, he'd present her work as his. During client reviews, he'd repeat her ideas using different words. When executives praised the results, he accepted the compliments without hesitation. Sade never exposed him, never complained, never made a scene. She simply kept working. And somehow that infuriated him even more. Because deep down, he knew the truth. Without the family name, he wasn't the smartest person in the room. She was. And tonight had never really been about ice cream. It was about making sure everyone remembered their places. Unfortunately for Tae-young, Sade was finally done playing along. Across the ballroom, whispers spread. She's actually standing up to him. She's crazy. She's getting fired tomorrow. No chance she survives this. The comments drifted through the crowd. Sade heard them all, just like she'd heard everything else during the last 3 weeks. The jokes, the rumors, the insults, the whispers when she walked past. She remembered the day someone moved her desk beside the supply closet. The day she discovered her chair had been replaced with a broken one. The afternoon she found coffee poured across her reports. The morning someone had written, "Interns belong downstairs" on a sticky note attached to her monitor. Every single time, she had cleaned it up quietly. Every single time she told herself it wasn't worth creating trouble. Every single time she went home and smiled when Jun-ho asked how work was going. Good. That was always her answer. Good. She never told him about the rest room where employees accidentally locked her inside for 20 minutes. Never told him about eating lunch alone. Never told him about the projects stolen from her. Never told him about the names. Because she had made a promise. This internship would belong to her. Not to the CEO's wife. To Sade, the woman who earned her place. The woman who wanted to succeed without anyone opening doors for her. Even now, she wasn't thinking about her husband. She was thinking about herself, about dignity, about enough finally being enough. The betrayal hurt most from people she'd helped. A financial analyst named Min Soo had laughed earlier. 2 weeks ago, she'd stayed late fixing his model. A consultant who had mocked her background tonight had begged for her help before a client presentation. Another employee, who implied she'd slept her way into the company, had once thanked her for saving a report hours before a deadline. The memories stung, not because they were cruel, because they were cowardly.
The only person who never joined in was Hana. Another intern. Another target. Hana Kim. Quiet. Hardworking. Always nervous. Last year, Tae-young spent months humiliating her, making her redo assignments for no reason, publicly criticizing her, destroying her confidence. Hana understood exactly what Sade was enduring, which was why she stood frozen near the back of the room now, fear written all over her face. She wanted to help, but she also knew what happened to people who challenged Tae-young. She shook her head, begging Sade to stop. But that's all she could do, and hated herself for it. Meanwhile, Tae-young's face was turning red. "You think you're special?" Sade crossed her arms. "No." "Then why are you refusing?" "Because I'm not a waitress." His jaw clenched. "You are whatever I tell you to be." "No." The second refusal hit harder than the first. Several clients exchanged looks. The mood had shifted completely. This wasn't office teasing anymore. This was something uglier, something harder to ignore. Tae-young stepped closer. "So that's what this is?" His voice rose. "The intern suddenly found confidence?" Sade met his gaze. "No." Another step. "Then explain it." Another. "You want an explanation?" The room held its breath. "Sure." Her voice remained calm. Too calm. The calm of someone who had finally stopped being afraid. "For 3 weeks, I've done work you claimed as your own." A murmur spread through the room. Tae-young froze. "For 3 weeks, I've corrected mistakes you presented to clients." The murmurs grew louder. "For 3 weeks, I've listened to you insult people because you're terrified they'll discover you're not nearly as smart as you pretend to be." A sharp gasp came from somewhere near the bar. The clients were openly watching now. No one was pretending anymore. Tae-young looked around. For the first time all night, he seemed uncertain. Then came the anger. Pure, unfiltered, dangerous. "You ungrateful little..." "Ungrateful?" Sade laughed once. A bitter laugh. The first genuine emotion she'd shown all evening. "You're right." The room became silent again. "I'm ungrateful." She nodded. "I'm ungrateful for the insults." Another nod. "I'm ungrateful for the stolen work." One more. "And I'm definitely ungrateful for being called trash by a man whose biggest achievement happened before he was born." The room exploded. Some gasped. Some covered their mouths. A few clients looked like they wanted popcorn.
Tae-young completely lost control, his face twisted with rage. "You little..." He grabbed her arm. Hard. The crowd recoiled. Sadi winced. His fingers tightened. "You think you're better than me?" "No." She looked directly into his eyes. "I know I'm better than you." The words shattered whatever restraint he had left. Tae-young raised his hand. The entire room froze. Hana gasped. Several clients stood. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." His hand moved. Fast. Violent. Ready to strike. But before it could reach her, a fist slammed into Tae-young's jaw. Crack. The sound echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. Tae-young's body flew sideways. He crashed into a table of champagne glasses. Crystal shattered. Guests screamed. The music stopped. For one stunned moment, nobody breathed. Nobody moved. Nobody understood what they had just witnessed. Tae-young groaned as blood appeared at the corner of his mouth. Then, the stranger stepped forward. Not a stranger. Not anymore. Jun-ho Baek, CEO of Yoon Capital Group, the most powerful man in the building. His eyes never left Tae-young. Not once. Not even when the room erupted into chaos. Not even when security began rushing toward them. Not even when executives stood frozen in shock. His entire focus remained on the man lying on the floor. The man who had dared touch his wife. How? Junho's voice was terrifyingly calm. Dare you?
Tae-young tried pushing himself upright. The second he did, Junho grabbed him by the front of his jacket and yanked him back down. The crowd gasped. "You put your hands on her." Another shove. Tae-young hit the marble again. "You humiliated her." Junho's voice grew colder. "You insulted her." The CEO leaned closer. "And then you tried to hit her." Tae-young's face had gone pale. For the first time in years, he looked genuinely afraid. Security finally arrived, then stopped. Nobody knew what to do. Because this wasn't just an employee. This was the CEO. And not just any CEO. Jun-ho Baek. The man who had spent years rebuilding the company from the brink of collapse. The man who almost never lost control. The fact he was angry at all was terrifying. The fact he looked ready to destroy someone was even worse.
"Sir." One security officer hesitated. Junho didn't even look at him. "I'm fine." The officer immediately backed away. Everyone did. Meanwhile, Sadie stood frozen. Not because she was scared. Because she'd never seen her husband look like this. Never. The gentle man who made her coffee every morning. The man who listened more than he spoke. The man who spent 20 minutes deciding what movie to watch. Gone. Standing in front of her was something else entirely. A man he looked capable of burning an empire to the ground. Tae-young finally found his voice. "You hit me?" Junho laughed. A short laugh. A dangerous one. "You're lucky that's all I did." The room fell silent again. Then Junho slowly stood, straightened his jacket, and looked around the ballroom. At the executives,
The clients, the managers, the analysts, every single person who had watched, every single person who had laughed, every single person who had stayed silent. Disgust flashed across his face. I leave my wife alone for 3 weeks. The silence broke for a split second. Wife? One of the executives whispered it like a glitch in reality. What wife? Another voice followed, sharper. She's an intern, isn't she? A nervous laugh slipped out from somewhere in the crowd. No way, that's his wife. She's just staff, right? The confusion rippled fast, turning into disbelief. Tae-young slowly wiped the blood from his lip, eyes narrowing as he looked between them. She's your wife? His voice cracked into a bitter laugh. She's your wife? He shook his head like it was the most ridiculous thing he'd ever heard. You expect me to think that this thing is your wife? The hell? I don't even care at this point. His gaze snapped back to Sade, twisting with anger again.
The room collectively froze.
Shut up, Tae-young. I can't believe this is what my company has become. I was sat there watching everything, thinking she was fine, until you tried to hit her. Nobody answered. Nobody could. Because there wasn't an excuse in existence good enough. Junho's gaze moved across the crowd. I trusted this company. His voice echoed through the room. I trusted the people in this room. Then he pointed at the chocolate stain still covering Sade's blouse. And not one of you thought maybe throwing food at an employee crossed a line? Let's forget she is my wife. Is this normal to an employee? Nobody could meet his eyes. Not even the clients.
The silence was devastating. Junho turned back toward Tae-young. You think your family protects you? Tae-young wiping more blood from his lip. My grandfather built this company. A few executives visibly cringed. Junho smiled. That smile scared them more than his anger. No. The CEO shook his head. Your grandfather helped build this company. Tae-young frowned. What? You still don't know? A ripple moved through the room. Several board members suddenly looked uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. Junho's eyes narrowed. Ask your uncle. Tae-young blinked. What are you talking about? Ask him. Now.
The entire ballroom watched, confused. Tae-young looked toward one of the older executives standing near the back. His uncle. The man's face had turned ghost white. And suddenly, Tae-young looked nervous. Uncle? The older man couldn't answer. Junho answered for him. 5 years ago, your family was drowning in debt. Silence. 3 years ago, they were hours away from losing everything. More silence. Tae-young stared. No. Oh, yes. Junho nodded.
The loans, the bad investments, the failed acquisitions. All of it. The CEO took another step forward. And when the banks came to collect, his smile vanished. I bought almost everything. The room exploded. Gasps. Shocked whispers. Utter disbelief. Tae-young looked like he'd been punched again. What? You heard me. Junho's voice remained calm. I'm not simply the CEO. Another pause.
I'm the majority owner." The room became completely silent. Even the clients looked stunned, because that changed everything.
CEOs could be fired. Owners couldn't. Tae-young shook his head. "No." His voice sounded desperate. "No." "Your uncle knows." Junho looked toward the older man. "Don't you?" The uncle slowly lowered his eyes. That was answer enough. Tae-young staggered backward. Everything he'd believed his entire life shattered in seconds. The company wasn't his. The future wasn't his. The power wasn't his.
It never had been. Junho had simply allowed him to keep pretending. And now, everyone knew. The humiliation hit harder than any punch. Then, something inside Tae-young snapped. Completely. His face twisted.
His eyes found Sade, and suddenly, all his anger redirected toward her.
"This is her fault!"
The outburst startled everyone. Tae-young pointed directly at her, his voice cracking.
"This is who she really is! You all think she's special? She's nothing! Her husband felt sorry for her. He picked her up as charity. Without him, she'd be nobody."
The words had barely left his mouth. Slap! The sound cracked through the ballroom. Tae-young's head snapped sideways. Silence descended again. Sade slowly lowered her hand. For the first time all night, she looked angry. Not controlled. Not patient.
"Angry. You don't know a thing about me," Sade said, her voice dangerously steady. Tae-young laughed bitterly, rubbing his jaw. "Oh, really? You're an intern. A charity case." Sade took one step forward. "Without him, I'd be nobody? Tae-young, without me, you wouldn't have survived this quarter." The laughter died instantly. The executives in the room exchanged confused glances. "What are you talking about?" Tae-young spat, though a flicker of uncertainty crossed his eyes. "The Q4 risk assessment," Sade stated clearly, her voice projecting across the silent room. "The forecasting model you presented to the board on Tuesday? The restructuring plan for the Eurotech merger?" She held his gaze. "I wrote every single one of them." "It's a lie!"
Tae-young stammered, his voice trembling as he looked around at the murmuring crowd. He backed away, warring with a desperate need to maintain his facade.
No, she's lying. I built those models. You're just a young intern trying to steal credit because your husband owns the place." Sade didn't flinch. She didn't yell. She calmly reached into her clutch and pulled out her phone. "You're sloppy, Tae-young," she asked quietly. "When you copied my files from the shared intern drive, did you ever bother to check the document properties or the hidden metadata?" Tae-young froze. Sade tapped a few keys on her screen. A second later, the massive digital projection screen behind the ballroom stage, previously displaying the Yoon Capital Holiday logo, flickered. The logo vanished. In its place, a massive spreadsheet of server logs and document version histories appeared.
A collective gasp echoed through the room. Several of the senior analysts and board members pushed their way to the front, their eyes narrowing as they read the screen. Highlighted in bright yellow were the access logs. They clearly showed Sade's credentials creating, editing, and finalizing the complex financial models days before Tae-young's credentials accessed them, copied them, and simply saved them under his own name. Sade looked up from her phone. "You stole my work because you couldn't keep up with the market shifts.
What you didn't realize is that I embedded a macro in the forecasting model, a tracking code that logs the original author's keystrokes. It's standard auditing procedure, something a real senior analyst would know to look for. Tae-young's eyes darted from the screen to Sade, then back to the screen. He recognized the undeniable proof. The clients in the room were whispering furiously. The board members looked livid. It was impossible to fake. "You," he whispered, his voice completely hollow. The realization
shattered the last remaining pieces of his ego. He wasn't just losing his family's company. He was being exposed as a complete professional fraud in front of every major client Yoon Capital had. The reality of his situation crashed down on him all at once. His grandfather's legacy was gone. His uncle couldn't save him. And now he had publicly humiliated the CEO's wife, a woman who had just definitively proven she was the actual brains behind his recent successes.
Tae-young's knees gave out. He hit the polished marble floor. "Please," he choked out, looking up at Junho. The arrogance was completely eradicated, replaced by a pathetic, weeping desperation. "Please, Mr. Back, I'm sorry. I was under so much pressure. I didn't know she was your wife." Junho stared down at him with absolute zero warmth. "Sade," Tae-young begged, turning to her. He clasped his hands together. "Folasade, please. The ice cream, the insults. I was threatened by how smart you are. I'm sorry. Don't take my job. My family has nothing else. Please."
Sade looked down at the man sobbing at her feet. She remembered the 3 weeks of having her work stolen.
She remembered the comments about her accent and background. She remembered her broken desk chair and the coffee poured on her reports. She remembered Hana Kim, the quiet intern Tae-young had spent months humiliating and destroying.
"You aren't apologizing because you're sorry," Sade said smoothly. "You're apologizing because you finally realized you have no power here, and you never actually had the talent to back up your title." Junho stepped forward, his voice booming across the silent ballroom. "Tae-young Yoon, you are terminated, effective immediately, for gross professional misconduct, plagiarism, and harassment. Security will escort you out of this building. If you ever come within 100 feet of my wife or this company again, my legal team will ensure you never work in finance again." 2 security guards immediately moved in, hauling a sobbing, pleading Tae-young to his feet and dragging him out of the ballroom. His cries echoed down the hallway until the heavy mahogany doors swung shut. Silence reclaimed the room.
Junho turned to Sade. The terrifying coldness in his eyes instantly melted, replaced by the gentle, loving man who made her coffee every morning. He reached out, delicately wiping the remaining smudge of chocolate from her cheek with his thumb. "Are you ready to go home?" he asked softly. Sade looked around the room. Every executive, every client, every analyst who had laughed at her or stayed silent was now staring at her with a mixture of profound awe and deep shame. They didn't just see the boss's wife. They saw a brilliant, terrifyingly competent woman who had just dismantled a senior analyst with nothing but facts. She caught the eye of Hana Kim near the back. Sade offered the terrified girl a small, reassuring smile. Hana let out a breath and smiled back, tears of relief in her eyes. "No," Sade said, turning back to her husband. "I think I'd like to stay and finish the evening. I earned my place at this party." On Monday morning, Folasade Adalakun Baek walked into Yoon Capital Group. She wasn't carrying a designer bag, and she didn't demand an executive suite. She walked straight to the intern bullpen, sat at her newly replaced, pristine desk, and opened her laptop. She was still an intern. That was the path she had chosen, to learn the ground-level operations of the business and prove herself on her own merits. But everything else had changed. When she walked down the halls, senior partners offered polite nods of respect. When she presented her findings in meetings, the room went dead silent to listen. And when she drafted a report, no one dared put their name on it but hers. She didn't need a secret identity or a legendary status to command the room. She was full of Sade. She was brilliant, she was unyielding, and she had completely earned her respect.
If you enjoyed this story, subscribe. Thank you.